I'm so proud that the University of the Third Age has reached 30 years. It started as a small concept, I suppose, back in 1985 actually, when I went to Melbourne to visit a friend of mine, or a colleague of mine, who was also planning a U3A. He was at Monash University. So we discussed the whole concept at that time. I came back with the idea of establishing a University of the Third Age, which was strongly associated with the University of WA. This was really because in the history of university extension, UWA was regarded as being a sort of iconic university in the community, and it had always had a close community relationship, going back as far as Sir Fred Alexander, who the Alexander Library is named after. And following on from that, of course, University Extension had developed a lot of outreach programs, including the Festival of Perth, the first Playhouse Theatre, and many others. So I suppose one of the reasons why I thought this was a good thing too is because at that time I was thinking about education in a way that focused on organic movements such as the University of the Third Age. I felt that what we were doing at University Extension was actually more of a benefaction model. In other words, we were telling the community what they wanted, and I felt that the University of Third Age model of living is learning and gaining the wisdom for their courses from people who had been not just necessarily people educated, but people who had the wisdom derived from working in corporations or science or whatever other activities they might have done. And so they were the deliverers of the course and also the receivers of the program. So it was a very attractive model as far as I was concerned. So I came back from Monash University feeling quite fired up, I can tell you. And as a consequence, we started doing some research into the origins of U3A, which of course did start in France, and working out ways that we could adapt that model to a model that was representative of what we felt the community would want in WA. One of my staff, Sue Johnson, was very enthusiastic, and by March the 8th, 1986, we were ready to start a U3A. Now, there was a lot of work that went in before then. I had many meetings with the Vice-Chancellor and the Deputy Vice-Chancellor. Roy Lawrence was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and Professor Robert Smith was the Vice-Chancellor. And one quite memorable meeting with Robert Smith involved me asking him for the sum of $10,000 to set up a U3A. Well, he was a lovely man. I really liked him as a person and as a Vice-Chancellor. But he looked at me very quizzically and said, "What?" And then we explored the idea a bit more, and he said, "Well, how many people do you think you'll get to it?" And I knew that Monash had got about 250, and I thought, well, if Monash can do that, well, we can get at least 300. So I told him 300. And his response was, well, he laughed, actually. He didn't think that I could possibly do that. So that fired me up a bit, and so we renewed our advertisements and our activities. And so by the time that we were ready, and the meeting was on the March the 8th, as I said, 2:30 in the afternoon, a Sunday, and it was a terribly hot day. I remember driving to the university, and at the entrance, cars were lined up, and I was in a long queue. By the time I got into I didn't get into a parking bay actually, because it wasn't any left. and I had to park illegally. But I could see that when I got out of the car, everyone was above, I would say, 55. So I knew I had a problem on my hands. So at the last minute, I rang Tom Whitelaw, who was head of university theatres, and I said, Tom, look, I'm a bit worried about this. And he said, well, how many do you think you'll get? And I said, well, I think it'll be more than 300. Well, he also laughed at me, and I took that on the chin, and of course it was festival time. And so Tom didn't have many available venues. But he said to me, look, the only one I've got is the Somerville Auditorium. Well, I knew the Somerville took about 1,300, so I thought, well, I think that might just do it. and so with that in mind, when I got out of the car, I knew, as I said, I had a problem. The staff were at Hackett Hall, trying to manage a very long queue of people, and they weren't quite sure whether to let them in or move directly to the Somerville. Anyway, I remember saying to them, look, we do have a bit of an issue here. Don't let's panic now. We'll have plenty of time to do that afterwards. Let's get to the Somerville. So away we went, and everyone followed and were very obliging and quite... as older people have a sense of humour dominated. So instead of my very well prepared overheads and notes, Tom quickly got a sort of a pedestal, I suppose it must have been, because I'm not one of the tallest people, and so. Anyway, we got me up on something or other, and I just started to talk. I'm not sure what came out of my mouth really, but as I had such a wonderful staff, we did manage to get things organised in a certain way. And so not long after, of course, the opening of the U3A, I had a call from Professor Robert Smith, the Vice-Chancellor, who invited me to lunch. During the lunch, we talked about the U3A and his absolute amazement that we didn't just get 300 people, but we got close to 1,300 people, which was, of course, a record for any U3A, certainly in Australia, and I suspect that would be right up there with all of those overseas. So after having a delicious lunch, he very quietly slid an envelope onto the table, and in it was a cheque for $10,000. And he congratulated us on introducing the U3A to the university. And as I said to him at the time, the university is a winner here because in its charter it has a role to provide education to the community, and in the U3A it is fulfilling that responsibility. So that's how the University of the Third Age started. Now, I have to say that we didn't capture all of those people that came. What followed was, of course, the establishment of the U3A. But then I thought, we've got to go further than this. And so we started up what we called was open access. And that allowed people in the community to enrol in courses in the university and sort of pay as they went. And so that worked very well as well. So we accommodated both groups of people. But the University of the Third Age has just gone on to great things. It's all set up in regions, and when I look at the programs now, I'm just overawed by the quality of them, the depth of them, and the number of people who attend them. And so of all the things, I suppose, that I've done at university as Director of University Extension for all those years, that comes down to being probably my number one achievement. And so, to U3A, happy birthday on your 30th birthday. Thank you.